Hi, I'm Andy from Roland, and today I wanted to take a closer look at the new update that we've added to our flagship synthesizer, the Roland System 8. So this summer we've added a whole new set of features which have brought it up to version 1.3, and I wanted to have a bit of a closer look at them and also a bit of a recap as to the kind of things that you can do with the System 8. So now let's have a quick look at some of the new filters that have been added in version 1.3. If you can see on the System 8 here, up in the filter section, we have a variation, which can go all the way through 1, all the way up to 8 now. And what this is, this allows you to choose different types of filter algorithms based on your sound. So number 1 is the standard low-pass filter and high-pass filter that comes with the System 8 engine as it is. Number 3 is the filter from the System 1, which is sort of the baby brother of the System 8, and it has its own kind of distinct character, which is a little bit different. But then what's really nice is filter 4 is the Jupiter 8 filter, filter 5 is the Juno 106. So what's really great is now you can take sort of the expansive wave selection that you get in the System 8 engine, but then run them through some classic filters, which is great, and I'll show you an example in a second. We also have 2 types of formant filters, and then also a harmonic filter as well. So to give you a bit of an example, so this particular patch here, so this is one of the new presets that you can get for it. This uses the waveforms from the System 8 engine, so it's just using saw waves from the System 8 engine, but then it is running through the Jupiter 8 filter. So that's running through the Jupiter 8 filter, but as an example, if I switch it to number 5, which is the Juno 106 filter, as we're playing a note, you can hear that it'll have a different kind of sound. So I'm just going to switch between 2 different filter types here so you can hear there's a little bit of a difference. So this sound is using the Jupiter 8 filter to begin with. So with that, you can hear that it has a slight different character as we were changing it from the Jupiter 8 to the Juno 106 filter. There's perhaps a little bit less low end on the Juno 106 filter, and it's slightly brighter. These are subtle changes, but it really, really helps you sort of hone in on your sounds if you're really into sound design, which is great. Another cool feature that you can get on the System 8 is the Chord Memory function. So the System 8 is an 8-note synthesizer. You can play up to 8 notes at once, but actually we can sort of put them together in a bit of a chord mode to play things in unison in quite an interesting way. So for instance, if I've got a very basic sound here, just a square wave, if I hold down chord memory, I can specify a few notes for it to play at the same time. So this is just 4. Now when I play a note, it plays all 4 at the same time. You could specify up to 8 notes to create a really thick lead sound like this. But you can use it in quite a cool couple of creative ways. So you can use it with the arpeggiator. So for instance, if you were running an arpeggio, you could do a very complex chord pattern, but every time you wanted to change the note, you'd have to play in all of the notes. But we can use the chord memory to do that. So if I put in a musical scale and apply the arpeggiator and the key hold, so that's playing that just as our chord memory. But what's quite cool is that instead of me having to play that every time I want to change the notes, I can have it playing the pattern for me. So as I change notes while we've got it on key hold, you'll hear it'll just shift that scale to a different pitch, which is cool. So that can be really handy in a live situation if you want to have a bit more of a complex kind of pattern going, and you don't want to have to play it in every time you make a change. It frees up your hands for doing more knob twiddling. Now we're going to take a closer look at the oscillators that you get in the System 8 engine. In the System 8, initially it shipped with 12 oscillators that you could choose, but now in the latest update we've expanded that up to 24, which are all FM style waveforms, which again really expands the sound design possibilities with it. So we're going to have a bit of a closer look. So the initial set of oscillators that came with them, we had some traditional ones like saw, square and triangle. And then we had some that are quite unique to Roland. So you had things like the super saw. The super saw is a really cool waveform because it's actually 7 saw waves that are stacked together, and then you can detune the middle 3 to make some really thick sounds, which are great for pads and for trance. So. We have a super square waveform, which is again the same kind of principle as the super saw, but with square waves, and it just sounds really nasty. And a super triangle as well, which is really good for pad sounds. Moving on to variation 2, we have some different types of sort of analog style waveforms. So we have things like a noise saw, a logic waveform, standard FM, and then FM sync, and a formant, and also the cowbell from a TR-808, which is actually really cool if you use it as an oscillator. You can make some actually really interesting sounds with that, which is cool. But in the latest update, so now we have banks 3 and 4, and in 3 and 4 we have FM style waveforms. So all of the ones in bank 3 are great for sort of FM style bell tones and things. As you sweep through the waveform, you can hear different types of tonality. And they're really great building blocks for sounds, and we'll have a look at some in a second. If you move on to bank 4, we again have more metallic style FM waveforms. And they're really great for making some harsher kind of sounds. So those of you who aren't too familiar with FM synthesis, FM stands for frequency modulation. And the way that it works is it uses one oscillator waveform fired against another one to modulate it and change the sound. Older style FM synths use a thing called operators rather than oscillators. So you might have 6 or 7 operators, which sort of form the basis of your sounds. And then you also have algorithms, which are different sequenced orders that you can put the operators in to create different types of tones. It is quite an involved and quite a difficult process of making sounds, actually, doing that way. But what's really, really nice about the System 8 is that process has been simplified. So as you heard maybe in the examples that we're showing there, so rather than me having to mess around with operators and algorithms, things like that, I'm able to sweep through the range of sounds that you can get by just using the color dial. Which is great when it comes to sound design because you don't have to spend ages messing around trying to find the exact setting. You can sort of dive straight into creating your sound, which is great. It's a real time-saving thing. Now we're going to take a quick look at some of the types of sounds that you can create using the new oscillators and the new filters as well. So this first one that we're going to look at here, this is a traditional style FM chorused piano. So we're just using the oscillators from bank 3 to create sort of an FM style bell tone. It's running through the standard System 8 filter, but then it's also added some chorus from the effects section. So. So this second sound that we're going to look at here, this is quite an interesting sound. This is using the FM waveform that comes in bank 2 of the System 8 engine, but then it's also running through filter 7, which is one of the formant style ones. So this is a sound called oi oi. So you can hear as that's sweeping through the filter changes, it's changing the formants, and creating some really interesting tones. So, this last sound is using one of the FM waveforms from Bank 4, and it is also going through filter 6, which we can see is one of the formant ones as well. That's also using variation 2 in the LFO, which allows us to have two LFOs that kind of cascade into each other. So if I hold down the note, you can see that as it starts to wobble, it speeds up because there's a second LFO acting on it. So as you can see, now in the System 8 engine alone, the sound design possibilities are endless. You can take analog style waveforms, run them through analog style filters, that's great. You can take more modern sounding tones from the FM waveform and again run them through those vintage filters, which is really great. Or you can just let your imagination run wild and create some really interesting sounds. The System 8 also features a really great sequencer, which you can do up to 64 notes. In the latest update that's been added to it, we can now actually overdub over the top of that sequencer. So let's have a quick look at it. So I'm going to put it in step record mode. And now I've just set it to be 16 steps, this particular sequence. But now when I put in notes, you'll see that they start filling in across here. So now I've filled my 16 notes. If I press start, it'll start playing those. And I can change things like the gate time, and I can also change the scaling of it. So if it's going from 8th notes or 16th note or 30 seconds, and I can also change the direction that it looks in. So I'm going to play it now. I'm going to mess around with a couple of these controls, and I'll point to what I'm doing so you can see where we're going. So you can use the sequencer quite creatively to enhance your performance. But now we can overdub over the top of it, which is cool. So I've already got my sequence of 16 steps on there. If I wanted to add an extra layer of sounds to them, I can do that by holding edit and pressing step record. So this is flashing and this is telling me that now I'm in overdub mode. So what I can do is I can either do it in real time or I can just add notes underneath. So if I add in a couple of bass notes, so I've not done it on every step, but now when I play the sequence, so now it sounds like I've got an extra bass line going underneath the sequencer, which is great. You can actually overdub 4 notes, so you can go, if you wanted to add in another layer, you can do, and build it up to 4, which is fantastic. The other thing that you can do with the sequencer, and you've been always able to do this, is you can record parameter automation within the sequencer. So if I was to put it in what I call real-time record, so that's recording as we're playing, and hit start. If I tweak the cutoff, it'll record that information into the pattern as well. So now it's recorded that information in the pattern. Another nice little feature that is on the sequencer is a key trigger mode. So if I put it on key trigger mode, it means that it'll only play the sequencer when I play a particular note myself. So if I hit start, nothing happens because I haven't played a note. But as soon as I play something, it'll trigger the sequencer. And this is cool because actually you can use this again in a performance thing. So if I play some extra notes, it'll trigger the sequencer and we can again have like a bit of a section of the song going. So. And if you didn't want to have it triggered by a key there, it also has a trigger input on the back. So if you have a drum machine, so say our TR-8S, you could send a trigger pattern from that and that will advance the sequencer on as well. So it's really great in the context of a larger setup too. So that was some of the new features that you get in the System 8 engine, but we also just wanted to talk about the plug outs as well. The System 8 has got 3 plug out slots, which allow you to load in one of our classic synths and take it away with you so that you can perform live without a computer and use it as if you had the original hardware machine, which is great. So the System 8 always shipped with, in plug out 1, the Jupiter 8, in plug out 2, the Juno 106, but now in the latest update, it also ships with the JX3P. If you do the update, which is a free update, if you're an existing System 8 owner, you can get the JX3P as well. So what's quite cool is because these model sort of the original instruments and using that analog circuit behavior technology, so it's modeling all the components that we use in them, it gives you the actual panel layout that you get for that particular synth. So if you notice when I'm on the System 8 engine and I flip over to the Jupiter 8, a lot of the lights go out on it. And that's because these particular controls weren't available on the original synth. So on the Jupiter 8, for instance, you only had 2 oscillators. So the sub oscillator and the noise oscillator go out. Likewise on the Juno 106, which was a bit more of a simpler instrument, those controls went out as well. And another cool thing that you can see as soon as I flip over to the JX3P, because they model the chorus circuits that came with the original Juno 106 and JX3P, which were quite noisy, and they model the noise. So with each of the plug outs and the System 8 engine, you have 64 patches. So 8 banks of 8, banks A through H with patches 1 through 8. In the 3 plug out slots, you get a selection of new sounds that have been made with using the engine, but then you also get some recreations of the original presets, which are really, really nice. So for instance, in the Jupiter 8 engine, we have a modern take on a Jupiter string sound. But as we cycle through the patches and you get towards the end, you'll see that they start to begin with a number 1981. So these ones here are all patches that were originally on the Jupiter 8 when it was launched. So anything with a 1981 is an original preset on there. So we could listen to a similar kind of patch. So this one, high strings, this was an original preset that was on the Jupiter 8. And they're really cool because that means you can use those to sort of to build your own sounds based on those classic sounds. In the Juno 106, a similar kind of thing. So this patch is using the Juno 106 engine, but it's running it through some of the effects to make it a bit more aggressive sounding. The other cool thing that's on the System 8, I should have mentioned, is that we have a velocity sensitive filter, and this is working on this now. So this is using the Juno 106 engine, using a velocity sensitive filter. So the harder I play, the more the filter opens. The softer I play, the more it keeps it closed. And then it's running through some distortions to make kind of a really aggressive sound. So. And as I say, it's because it's velocity sensitive, the softer I play, it's more closed. And then the harder I play, it opens up. Likewise with the Jupiter, on the Juno 106, we have all of some of those original presets as well. So if I keep scrolling through, you'll see eventually 1984. And this is a strings patch that was on the Juno 106, sorry. And another cool one, which was 1984 Caverns, which is... That uses things like a white noise to create sort of an interesting tone out of it, which is nice. Here's one with an arpeggiator running. Unlike the other plug outs, we also get some of the original presets that came with it. So this is one from 1983, the Celesta sound. The original aim of those synths was to try and recreate the sound of real instruments, because at the time, musicians didn't really have access to those in a portable kind of package. So obviously some of these sounds maybe sound quite basic by modern standards, but they're obviously great building blocks for making your own sound, so they're worth messing around with. There are other plug outs that are available. If you didn't want, you could actually remove all three of these and have different choices in there. So we make a few others that are available, which are all monophonic. You get the SH101, the SH2, the Pro Mars, and the System 100 modular synth. And they're all available to load in. So those are the new features that have been added to the latest update to the System 8. I think you'll agree that it really expands the sonic possibilities. If you have a System 8 already, version 1.3 is a free download from the Roland website, so you can add in those new oscillators, the new filters, and the new plug out absolutely free. And if you're thinking about getting one, it'll obviously come with those features straight out of the box, which is great. Thanks very much for watching. I'm Andy from Roland. I'll see you next time.
La 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 la